I never thought I'd be sitting here, recording this story. My hands are shaking even now. But if my journey can help even one person feel less alone, then it's worth sharing every painful, beautiful moment of it. My name is Daniel. I'm 62 years old. And for 50 years, I carried a secret that nearly destroyed me. Let me take you back to where it all began. Summer of 1972. I was 12 years old, living in a small town in Michigan where everybody knew everybody's business. We had one of those classic American families. Dad worked at the factory, Mom stayed home with us kids. I had two older sisters, Margaret and Caroline, and one younger brother, Tommy. Margaret was 17 that summer. She had this whole wardrobe that fascinated me in ways I couldn't understand. While other boys my age were collecting baseball cards and building model airplanes, I found myself drawn to her room when nobody was home. It started innocently enough. I'd just look at her dresses hanging in the closet, touch the fabrics, wonder what it felt like to wear something so different from my rough denim jeans and scratchy cotton shirts. The softness of those materials called to something deep inside me that I had no words for. One afternoon in July, everyone had gone to visit our grandmother across town. I had faked being sick that morning, complaining about a stomachache. Mom had believed me, left me some soup on the stove, and they'd all piled into our old station wagon. I waited until I heard the car disappear down the street. Then I waited another 10 minutes, just to be absolutely sure. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Margaret's room smelled like her perfume and hairspray. Everything was so neat, so carefully arranged. I stood in front of her closet for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, with trembling hands, I reached for a simple blue dress. Nothing fancy, just a cotton sundress with little white flowers on it. I still remember the feeling of that fabric sliding over my skin. It was like discovering a part of myself I never knew existed. I stood in front of her full-length mirror, and for the first time in my 12 years, I felt something click into place. Something that made sense in a world that often didn't. I wore that dress for maybe 20 minutes, then carefully put it back exactly where I'd found it. Straightened everything. Made sure there wasn't a single trace of what I'd done. And I carried that secret like a stone in my chest. That became my pattern. Whenever the house was empty, I'd sneak into Margaret's room. Sometimes Caroline's too. I became an expert at knowing exactly where everything went, how everything should look. I was covering my tracks like some kind of criminal when all I was doing was trying to understand myself. The close calls were terrifying. Once, Margaret came home early from a friend's house. I heard the front door and had maybe 30 seconds to get out of her yellow skirt and blouse, stuff them back in the closet, and sprint to my room. I dove into bed fully clothed, pulled the covers up, and pretended to be asleep. My heart was hammering so loud I was sure she could hear it through the walls. She never said anything. Nobody ever said anything. So I kept going. High school was torture for different reasons. I was expected to be interested in girls the way the other guys were. Don't get me wrong, I liked girls. I had crushes. But there was this other part of me that wanted to be like them, not just be with them. How do you explain that to anyone when you barely understand it yourself? I dated a girl named Susan in my junior year. Sweet girl, really kind. But I felt like I was playing a role in a movie I hadn't auditioned for. Everyone around me seemed to have gotten a script I'd never received. At home, my opportunities to explore this hidden part of myself became fewer. Margaret went off to college. Caroline got more protective of her space. Tommy was always around. Mom had a sixth sense about when something was off. So I learned to wait, to be patient, to grab those precious few moments when they came. The summer after I graduated high school, something happened that should have ended everything. It was a Saturday afternoon in August. Hot, sticky weather. The kind where the air feels thick enough to swim through. Mom had taken Tommy to his Little League game. Dad was at work doing overtime. Margaret was married by then and living in Ohio. Caroline was supposed to be at her boyfriend's house. I thought I was alone. I'd gotten bolder over the years. This time I'd taken one of Caroline's dresses, a pretty green one with a belt, and I'd actually tried doing my hair. We had an old wig that Margaret had used for a Halloween costume years ago, hidden in a box in the basement. I'd found it months earlier and kept it in my room, buried under winter clothes. I was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, wearing that green dress, with that wig on, trying to figure out how to apply some of Caroline's lipstick without making a complete mess of it. That's when I heard it. The front door opening. Footsteps on the stairs. Pure panic seized me. There was no time. No time to change, no time to hide, no time to do anything. The bathroom door didn't have a lock because Dad had removed it years ago after Tommy locked himself in as a toddler. The footsteps stopped right outside the bathroom. I watched the doorknob turn in the mirror. Time seemed to slow down into this horrible, stretched-out moment where I could see my entire life collapsing. The door opened, and there stood my mother. We stared at each other in the mirror. Her face was unreadable. I couldn't breathe.
Couldn't speak.
Couldn't move. I was 18 years old, caught wearing my sister's dress and a wig, lipstick smeared awkwardly across my mouth. This was it. This was the moment everything would fall apart. She'd tell Dad. They'd kick me out. Send me to some doctor to fix me. I'd seen movies about what happened to people like me. There were hospitals. Treatments. Shame that followed you forever. Mom took a step into the bathroom. Then another. She reached past me and quietly closed the door behind her. And then she smiled. Not a big smile. Not laughing at me. Just this small, sad, knowing smile. She said 6 words that changed everything. How long has this been going on? I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My throat had closed up completely. Tears started running down my face, probably smearing that lipstick even worse. Mom reached over and gently took my hand. Her hand was warm and soft.
Real.
She gave it a little squeeze. It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe. I'm not angry. That broke something open in me. I started sobbing. Great big gulping sobs that I'd been holding in for 6 years. She pulled me into a hug, getting lipstick on her nice blouse, and just held me while I cried. When I finally calmed down enough to talk, the whole story came pouring out. Every sneaking moment. Every terrified minute. Every time I'd looked in the mirror and felt like I was seeing something true that the rest of the world said was wrong. Mom listened to everything. She didn't interrupt. Didn't judge. Just listened. When I was done, she sat down on the edge of the bathtub and patted the spot next to her. I sat down. This ridiculous picture of an 18-year-old boy in a dress and wig with tear-streaked makeup. I've known for a while, she said quietly. My head snapped up. What? I'm your mother, Daniel. I noticed things. Little things. The way you'd look at your sister's clothes. How carefully you'd avoid certain conversations. That time last year when I found one of Caroline's dresses wadded up in the back of your closet. You said you'd been moving boxes around, and it must have fallen in there. I thought you believed me, I whispered. I wanted to give you space to tell me when you were ready. But I also wanted you to know that whatever you're going through, whatever you're figuring out about yourself, I love you. That doesn't change. Ever. We sat there for a long time, neither of us saying anything. The afternoon sun came through the bathroom window, making everything feel warm and safe. Finally, Mom stood up. Let's get that makeup done properly, shall we? You're making a mess of it. That's how my mother and I spent that Saturday afternoon. She taught me how to apply lipstick correctly, how to blend foundation, how to make the wig look more natural. We laughed together, cried a little more together. She told me about an aunt I'd never met, her sister Rose, who'd been different too. Rose had moved to San Francisco in the 1950s and lived life on her own terms. The family hadn't understood, hadn't accepted her. Mom had always regretted not being braver, not standing up for her sister. I won't make that mistake twice, Mom said firmly. I don't fully understand what you're going through, honey. But I don't need to understand it to know that you're still my child, and I still love you exactly as you are. Those words. I've carried those words with me for 44 years. They've gotten me through the darkest times. They've been my anchor when everything else felt like it was falling apart. But that afternoon in the bathroom wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. Because loving acceptance from one parent doesn't change the reality of the world you live in. And the world I lived in 1973 was not kind to people like me. We agreed that this would stay between us. Mom said we needed to be practical. Dad wouldn't understand. Neither would my sisters. The town definitely wouldn't understand. So we'd be careful, smart, protected. She cleared out a small space in the back of her closet, behind her winter coats. That became my space. A few dresses, some makeup, a safe place to keep the pieces of myself I couldn't show the world. I went off to college that fall. Michigan State, about 2 hours from home. Far enough to have freedom, close enough to come home when I needed to. I studied accounting because it seemed safe and practical. I joined a fraternity because that's what guys did. I dated girls because that's what was expected. I was living 2 lives, split right down the middle. The public Daniel who did all the right things, said all the right words, looked like he was on the path everyone expected. And the private Daniel who came alive in stolen moments, in locked dorm rooms, in the safety of my mother's understanding. College in the mid-70s was a wild time. There was so much changing in the world. The war was ending. Music was exploding into new directions. People were questioning everything about the way society was structured. But small-town Michigan boys studying accounting at state universities weren't exactly at the forefront of social revolution. Most of my fraternity brothers were more concerned with beer and football than with challenging gender norms. I met Rachel in my sophomore year. She was studying elementary education, had this bright laugh that made everyone around her smile. We started dating casually at first.
She was easy to be with.
Didn't demand anything I couldn't give. By junior year, we were serious. By senior year, we were engaged. I never told her. How could I? What would I even say? Everything I knew about the world told me that what I felt, who I was in those private moments, was something to be ashamed of. Something that would drive people away. Something that would ruin any chance at a normal life. So I pushed it down, buried it deep, convinced myself that marriage and a career and a normal life would make these feelings go away. That I just needed to try harder to be the person everyone expected me to be. We got married in June of 1977. Big church wedding. All our families there. Mom cried during the ceremony, and I wonder now if some of those tears were for the secret she knew I was carrying down that aisle. Rachel and I moved to a suburb of Detroit. I got a job with a decent accounting firm. She got hired at an elementary school. We bought a small house with a yard. Got a dog named Murphy. Did everything that newlyweds in 1970s America were supposed to do. And I was miserable. Not because of Rachel. She was wonderful. Kind, patient, loving. We had a good marriage by all external measures. We laughed together. Supported each other's careers. Hosted dinner parties. Visited each other's families for holidays. But there was this whole part of me that I'd locked away. And the lock was getting harder to maintain. The pressure was building. I'd wait until Rachel had evening meetings at school. Then I'd pull out the small collection I'd been secretly building. A few dresses hidden in the back of the basement storage. Some makeup tucked behind paint cans on a high shelf in the garage. Those precious hours when I could be myself, or at least the self I thought I might be. The guilt was crushing. Rachel didn't deserve this. Didn't deserve a husband who was lying to her every single day. Who was sneaking around in his own home, who was pretending to be someone he wasn't. We had our daughter Emily in 1980. She was perfect, tiny and beautiful and entirely dependent on us. I loved her immediately with a fierce intensity that surprised me. I thought maybe this would fix things. Maybe being a father would make me into the man I was supposed to be. It didn't. If anything, having Emily made it worse. Because now there was someone else in my life who I was lying to. Someone who would grow up thinking her father was one person, when really he was someone entirely different. The years passed in this strange blur. Emily grew from a baby to a toddler to a little girl starting school. My career advanced. Rachel became a vice principal. We moved to a bigger house. Got a second dog. Lived the American dream. And every day, the gap between who I was and who I pretended to be grew wider. I became an expert at compartmentalization. Daniel the accountant, Daniel the husband, Daniel the father, Daniel the son, Daniel the neighbor. I had a persona for every relationship, every situation. All of them authentic in their way. None of them complete. The real me, the complete me, only existed in those stolen moments. 20 minutes here, half an hour there. Brief windows where I could drop all the masks and just breathe. Mom was still my only confidant. I'd visit my parents every few weeks. Dad and I would talk about work and sports. But then Mom and I would find reasons to be alone for a few minutes. She'd check in, make sure I was okay, remind me that she loved me. "You can't live like this forever, sweetheart," she told me one afternoon when I was about 35. We were in her kitchen, ostensibly making cookies for Emily. Dad was out in the garage. Rachel had taken Emily shopping. "I don't have a choice, Mom. There's always a choice. It might not be an easy choice, but it's there. You want me to blow up my marriage? Lose my daughter? Become the town scandal? I want you to be happy. Really happy. Not this half-life you're living." I didn't have an answer for that, because she was right. And knowing she was right didn't make any difference. I was trapped in a life I'd built brick by brick, and I couldn't see any way out that didn't destroy everything and everyone I loved. Then, in 1994, everything changed. Emily was 14. Rachel was thriving in her career. I'd just made partner at my firm. Life looked perfect from the outside. Rachel was supposed to be at a weekend conference for school administrators. Emily was staying with her best friend. I had the whole house to myself for 2 days. I'd planned it carefully. Really carefully. I took Friday afternoon off work. Went to a department store 2 towns over where nobody would recognize me. Bought a whole new outfit. Nothing from someone else's closet this time. Something that was actually mine. I came home, took my time getting ready. Really did it properly. Makeup, wig, the new dress, shoes that actually fit. I looked in our bedroom mirror, and, for the first time in my adult life, I saw myself. Not Daniel trying to be someone else. Just me. I felt beautiful. I felt right. I felt whole. I spent that Friday evening just living. Watching TV. Making dinner. Being comfortable in my own skin in my own home. It was heaven. I was so caught up in that feeling that I didn't hear the front door open. Didn't hear the footsteps coming up the stairs. Rachel's conference had been canceled at the last minute. She tried calling, but I'd turned the phone off, not wanting any interruptions. She walked into our bedroom and found me standing there in a dress and full makeup. The look on her face. I'll never forget it. Confusion.
Shock.
Something that might have been fear. She actually stepped backwards, like she didn't recognize me. "Daniel?" Her voice was so small. I couldn't speak. This was worse than when Mom had found me. So much worse. Because Mom had smiled. And Rachel definitely wasn't smiling. We stood there in horrible silence. Then she turned around and walked out. I heard her go down the stairs. Heard the front door close. Heard her car start and drive away. I thought my life was over. I changed clothes in a daze. Washed off the makeup. Put everything away. Then I just sat on the edge of our bed and waited. She came back 3 hours later. Her eyes were red. She'd been crying. We sat in the living room, on opposite ends of the couch. The physical distance between us felt like a canyon. "How long?" she asked. Same question Mom had asked all those years ago. But Rachel's voice was hard where Mom's had been soft. I told her everything. 26 years of secrets came tumbling out. The childhood experimentation. Mom's discovery and acceptance. The way I'd thought marriage would fix me. The stolen moments throughout our entire relationship. All of it. Rachel listened.
She cried.
I cried. It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had, and it was destroying us. When I finished, she sat there for a long time. Finally, she spoke. "I need time. I need to think. I need to figure out what this means." She went to stay with her sister. I stayed in our house, rattling around in rooms that suddenly felt enormous and empty. A week passed. Then 2. Emily knew something was wrong, but we told her mom was helping Aunt Jennifer with some stuff. The lie felt like ash in my mouth. When Rachel finally came home, she had terms. "I love you," she said. "But I married a man. I'm not attracted to this other side of you. I don't know if I can be married to someone who wants to present as a woman." "I'm still me," I said desperately. "I'm still Daniel. I'm still your husband, Emily's father, the same person I've always been." "But you're not. You've been lying to me for 15 years. You've been pretending to be someone you're not. How am I supposed to trust anything now?" She wasn't wrong. I couldn't argue with her. I'd built our entire marriage on a foundation of omission and half-truths. We tried therapy. We really tried. But our therapist was a nice man in his 60s who clearly had no framework for what we were dealing with. He kept talking about communication and trust, but he couldn't address the fundamental issue. Rachel had married someone she thought she knew, and I'd let her believe that person was the complete picture. We separated in 1995, divorced in 1996. It was as amicable as those things can be. We agreed on shared custody of Emily, split our assets fairly, remained polite and civil. But it broke my heart. Not just losing Rachel, though that hurt more than I can describe, but losing the life we'd built, the future we'd planned, the family unit that had been my anchor for so long. Emily was angry with me, confused. She knew there was more to the story than we were telling her, but she was 15 and dealing with her own teenage dramas. Her parents splitting up became one more way in which her life wasn't fair. I moved into a small apartment, kept working, saw Emily every other week and Wednesday evenings, went through the motions of living. And finally, for the first time in my life, I was alone. Really alone. No parents upstairs. No wife coming home. No daughter in the next room. Just me and four walls and the truth I'd spent 40 years running from. I could have used that freedom. Could have finally explored who I really was without fear of being discovered. But I didn't. I'd lost my marriage because of this part of myself. I wasn't about to let it cost me anything else. So I buried it deeper than ever. Threw away everything I owned. Got rid of every dress, every piece of makeup, every reminder. I was going to be the man everyone needed me to be, even if it killed me. And for a while I thought it might actually kill me. Depression is a strange beast. It doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like going through the motions. Waking up, going to work, coming home, going to bed.
Repeat.
Days blurring together into weeks, into months, into years. I saw Emily every week. Watched her graduate high school, go to college, start her career. She eventually forgave me for the divorce, though she never really knew what it was about. I think she assumed I'd had an affair or something. I let her believe it. It was easier than the truth. Mom died in 2003. Dad had passed 2 years earlier. At Mom's funeral, I found a letter she'd left for me. She must have written it knowing she didn't have much time left. In it, she reminded me of that afternoon in the bathroom 30 years earlier. She told me again that she loved me, that she was proud of me, that she hoped someday I'd find the courage to live authentically, the way she'd failed to support her sister Rose in doing. "Life is too short to spend it pretending," she wrote. "I hope you find a Rose. I hope you find your San Francisco. I hope you find yourself." I carried that letter with me for years. Read it over and over in dark moments.
But I still didn't act on it.
It wasn't until 2015, when I was 60 years old, that things began to change. I'd retired from the accounting firm, sold the apartment, was trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. Emily was married by then, living across the country, starting to talk about kids. I was unmoored, untethered. No job defining my days. No family nearby needing me. Just open time stretching ahead of me with nothing to fill it. One evening, I was browsing online, just killing time, and I stumbled across a forum. People talking about gender identity, cross-dressing, transgender experiences. Real conversations. People being honest about their journeys. I spent that entire night reading. Story after story of people who'd felt exactly like I felt. Who'd struggled with exactly what I'd struggled with. who'd found ways to live authentically. The world had changed so much since I was young. There were words now for things I'd never had language for. There were communities, support groups, understanding that didn't exist in 1972. I started reading every day, learning, understanding, piecing together parts of myself I'd never fully examined. And slowly, carefully, I started exploring again. Ordered a few things online. Nothing major, just small steps. A dress here, some makeup there. Taking my time, being gentle with myself. I found support group that met monthly in a city an hour away. Spent 3 months working up the courage to actually go. When I finally walked into that first meeting, I was terrified. 61 years old, shaking like a leaf, certain everyone would see through me somehow. Instead, I found acceptance, understanding, people of all ages dealing with similar journeys. Some were transgender women transitioning fully. Some were crossdressers who presented as men most of the time. Some were still figuring out what label fit them, if any. Nobody cared that I was starting this at 61. Nobody judged me for the years I'd spent hiding. They just welcomed me in. I met Linda at that group. She was 65, had transitioned 10 years earlier after her spouse passed away. She'd spent 40 years of marriage living as a man, raising kids, building a career. Then, when she was finally alone, she decided to live the rest of her life as herself. You can't get back the years you lost, Linda told me over coffee after one meeting. But you can decide what to do with the years you have left. That's your choice. Only yours. Those words echoed my mother's letter. Echoed things I'd told myself 1,000 times, but never quite believed. I started presenting as female more often. Just at meetings first. Then gradually in other safe spaces. LGBT-friendly events. Online communities where I could post photos and get supportive feedback. I chose the name Diana. It felt right. Still close to Daniel. Honoring where I'd come from while acknowledging where I was going. The journey wasn't linear. There were days when I felt confident and sure. Days when the dysphoria was manageable, when I looked in the mirror and liked what I saw. And there were days when I felt ridiculous. An old man playing dress-up. Too late to change anything that mattered. Just making a fool of myself. But I kept going. One day at a time. One small choice at a time. The biggest challenge was Emily. She was 36 by then. Had her own life, her own family. We had a good relationship, better than when she was a teenager navigating her parents' divorce. But I hadn't told her the real reason for that divorce. Hadn't been honest about who I was. And now, 20 years later, I needed to have that conversation. I planned it carefully. Invited her to visit me. Just her, not her husband and kids. Told her I had something important to discuss. She flew out, probably worried I was dying or something. We spent the first day just catching up, enjoying each other's company. Then that evening, sitting in my living room, I told her everything. I watched her face as I talked. Saw confusion, surprise, pieces clicking into place. When I mentioned the real reason her mother and I had divorced, I saw understanding dawn. So Mom didn't leave you because of an affair, she said slowly.
No.
She left because I wasn't fully honest with her about who I was. Because I let her marry someone she didn't really know. And you've been dealing with this your whole life? Yes. Emily sat with that for a while. Then she asked the question I'd been dreading. Are you going to transition? Are you going to become a woman? I don't know, I answered honestly. I'm still figuring that out. What I do know is that I need to stop hiding this part of myself. I need to be able to express it, explore it, understand it. I can't spend whatever years I have left pretending anymore. She didn't respond right away. We sat in silence as the evening darkened around us. Finally, she spoke. I need time to process this. It's a lot. I understand. But Dad. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. I love you. That doesn't change. You're still my father. You're still the person who raised me, who taught me to ride a bike, who helped me with homework. Whatever else you are, you're still that person too. I started crying. Couldn't help it. After all these years, hearing those words from my daughter meant everything.
We talked late into that night.
She asked questions. Some I could answer, some I couldn't. She processed out loud, working through her feelings, her memories, her understanding of her own history. It wasn't perfect. She struggled with it. There were follow-up conversations, phone calls where she worked through complicated emotions. She talked to her therapist. She read articles and books to try to understand. But she didn't walk away. She didn't reject me. She stayed in my life, even as I started presenting as Diana more publicly. That support made all the difference. Knowing that my daughter, the most important person in my life, accepted me gave me courage I never had before. I started living as Diana full-time about a year ago. Changed my name legally. Updated all my documents. Started hormone therapy, not to fully transition but to align my body a bit more with how I felt inside. At 62, I'm not trying to pass as a woman half my age. I'm not trying to erase Daniel completely. I'm trying to integrate all the pieces of myself into one complete person. Diana, who is Daniel. Daniel, who is becoming Diana.
Both.
Neither. Something entirely my own. The world is still not fully accepting.
I get stares sometimes.
Confused looks. The occasional nasty comment. But I also find unexpected kindness. People who don't care. People who smile and treat me like any other customer, neighbor, human being. I joined a local community theater group. We're doing a production next month, and I have a small role. It's terrifying and exhilarating at once. I'm dating for the first time in 20 years. That's a whole complicated journey of its own. Figuring out what I want, who I'm attracted to, how to explain my history to potential partners. It's messy and confusing and sometimes wonderful. Emily's kids call me Grandpa Diana. They're too young to fully understand, but they don't need to. They just know that Grandpa sometimes wears dresses, and that's okay, because everybody's different. I think about my mother a lot. Wish she could have seen this. See me finally taking her advice. Living authentically. Finding my own version of San Francisco, right here in Michigan. I think about Rachel too. Wonder if I should have been honest from the start. If we could have found a different path if I'd trusted her with the truth before we got married. I'll never know. But I hope she found happiness. She deserved that. And I think about young Daniel, 12 years old, standing in his sister's room, reaching for that blue dress with trembling hands. If I could go back and talk to him, I'd tell him it's okay. That he's not broken or wrong. That the journey will be long and hard, but he'll get there eventually. That he'll find people who love him exactly as he is. I spent 50 years hiding, pretending, fragmenting myself into acceptable pieces. I lost a lot of time, a lot of opportunities, a lot of authentic moments. But I'm here now. Diana, Daniel, whatever name fits in any given moment. I'm here, whole and honest, for whatever time I have left. That afternoon when Mom caught me in Caroline's dress and smiled, that moment changed everything. Her acceptance planted a seed that took 40 years to fully grow. But it grew. So here I am, 62 years old, finally wearing my own dresses, living in my own truth. It's not perfect. There are hard days, lonely days, days when I question everything. But I'm free, really free, for the first time in my life. And that smile my mother gave me in the bathroom mirror all those years ago, I can finally give that to myself. If you're watching this and seeing yourself in any part of my story, please know you're not alone. Whether you're 12 or 20 or 40 or 60, it's never too late to start being honest with yourself. The path isn't easy, but living a half-life is harder. Find your people, find your support, and find the courage to let the real you come forward, whatever that looks like for you. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, you're exactly who you're supposed to be. End of video.